Good evening. I would like to call the December 3rd meeting of the City of Johns Creek Planning Commission to order. At this time, I would like to ask everyone to please silence or turn off your cell phones. The Planning Commission has adopted procedures. They're available to the rear of the chamber. There are also copies of the standards of review available to the public. The Planning Commission is a recommending body to the mayor and city council, and we use these standards as guidelines in conjunction with the public hearing to assist us in formulating a recommendation to the mayor and city council. The presiding officer will call cases on the agenda for public hearing. First, the presiding officer shall recognize planning and zoning administrator to provide a summary of the application and present any recommendation or results of investigations. Staff shall then make a presentation of the case, after which members of the Planning Commission may ask questions of staff or other city representatives providing the report or recommendations. The applicant shall receive a time period of 10 minutes to present their case. The time is kept by the planning assistant. The applicant may choose to use their entire allotment or reserve time from their 10 minutes for rebuttal. Any member of the hearing body, upon recognition by the presiding officer, may ask questions of the applicant or agent of the applicant. The period of questions from the Planning Commission is not deducted from the applicant's 10-minute period. Opposition is granted a time period of 10 minutes per application at the public hearing to present data, evidence, or opinions. If a large number of people wish to speak in opposition, it is advisable to designate spokespersons to make the presentation. The city is not obliged to provide the full 10-minute period to opponent if they elect not to use their time and the opposition is not granted a rebuttal period. Any member of the hearing body, upon recognition by the presiding officer, may ask questions of any person giving public comment. After completing this process, the presiding officer will indicate that the public hearing is closed. Upon closing the public hearing, the Planning Commission can no longer be addressed by the applicant or opposition. At such time, the presiding officer will call for a motion, and if properly seconded, will call for a vote on the matter. The presiding officer will then state the vote and recommendation for the record. I will ask that all present act courteously and to refrain from outbursts or comments from the audience. I would like to recognize the commissioners in attendance this evening. Commissioner Taylor, Commissioner Horton, Commissioner Anand, Commissioner Schaefer, and Commissioner Carr. So, according to our agenda, we have to approve our minutes. Did everyone have a chance to look at the minutes? Were there any changes, or does anyone want to make a motion to approve?
I move we approve the minutes as presented.
Is anyone second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? So the minutes are approved 6-0. So our new business is a text amendment. It's A-19-003 to amend the City of Johns Creek zoning ordinances, Article 28, rezoning and other amendment procedures to revise the land use petition refilling component requirement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is unusual, but I'm just going to ask, if you don't mind, if there's any speaker cards, I'll go ahead and collect it and hand it over to the Madam Chair if you have it available. Okay, thank you. Staff is presenting the initiation for a text amendment that was actually initiated by City Council. Let me get myself situated here. Maybe not. Okay. Well, with that said, as the Section 28.2 of the zoning ordinance as it currently stands requires for any denied case that was denied by City Council before they could be reheard or reinitiated, they were required to wait a 12-month waiting period, and also need to come before the City Council to request for the reinitiation process, in which the applicant has to demonstrate a significant difference from the previous denial. And significant difference could be many different things: density, height, other subjects that may have been discussed as part of the public hearing that provide some type of change associated with the previous denial. As part of that review, the city attorney did provide an opine that the reinitiation process as it currently stands and currently provided in our zoning ordinance goes against what we refer to as the Zoning Procedures law, the ZPL. And that's found in Chapter 266, Title 36 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated Laws, which it states that there are certain requirements that need to be followed for any type of rezoning case. And those two requirements are public notice in a newspaper, 15 to 45 days, no later than 15 days, no greater than 45 days from the scheduled hearing, and for a sign to be posted on the property. In addition to that, per our zoning ordinance, we do have a zoning impact analysis that is required for all of our rezonings. And the zoning impact analysis looks at 5 criteria that staff reviews and analyzes as part of the request. And that deals with suitability with adjacent properties, current economic uses, impact on public facilities, compatibility with the comprehensive plan, and environmental impact. Again, that's found in Section 28.4 of the zoning ordinance. As previously mentioned, as part of the reinitiation process, the applicant is supposed to present what we refer to in our ordinance as significant change, significant differences. The way it's been explained by our city council, by our city attorney, states that judicially, the council's interpretation of a significant difference could be judicially deemed arbitrary and capricious. Circumstances may also change over time to make a previous denied case valid without any material change. Essentially, what the city attorney was referring to is there isn't a set standard. It's very broad, it's very vague as to what those standards or significant changes may be. As part of this process, I went through multiple work sessions with the City Council in October. They had requested at one point to see if there's better ways that we could fine-tune the definition or requirements as to how they go about codifying significant changes. Based upon the city attorney's response, it was better that we do not provide for any type of requirements, in that it's a procedural matter, not necessarily a legislative matter. But the reinitiation process as a whole, from the staff's perspective, it is a land use petition. Essentially, the reinitiation process for a denied case, when they go before the City Council, they're requesting for an approval. If it wasn't related to a rezoning matter, there would be no need for them to go to City Council. There would be no need for them to go through this process. Essentially, the way the reinitiation process functions, it acts as a pre-approval, allowing them to take the next step as part of the rezoning, the land use petition process. So a couple of examples that we want to share, and just to show you what those significant changes may be. It may not be so significant potentially. And as you can see, the configuration of the lots from the one on the example to your left to your right, really it's a matter of layout, configuration of the lots. But in terms of use, it remains the same. So again, the argument of significant difference, and I don't necessarily want to sort of harp it on just that one specific notion as related to why we want to proceed with eliminating the reinitiation process and also coming out with new language related to the waiting period. But these are certain examples. The most recent one was this requested storage facility off of Jones Bridge Road. As you can see, the building, in essence, the footprint is pretty much the same. What they changed was the loading area and also the extension of the driveway in the rear. In terms of a land use impact, again, that is for the Planning Commission to determine as what you believe to be significant or not. But as you can see, again, these examples are showing you that there are variations to that understanding of what significant difference may be. But more so than not, the purpose and the reason why this text amendment has been initiated is not necessarily to debate the difference or the definition of significant change. It is to understand what we sort of follow in terms of rules and procedures. The zoning procedures laws, as I shared, are the minimum standards established by the state that local jurisdictions are to follow for any rezoning case. And essentially what that's supposed to do, and the purpose of the minimum procedures as taken out from the excerpt of Section 3666-2 is to assure that due process is afforded to the general public when local governments regulate the uses of property through the exercise of zoning power. Meaning, there are certain standards that we need to follow. Due process means we need to get the notices out, make people aware, so that, again, we afford that due process to the public. That's the chief argument here. From the reinitiation process, there is no requirement for them to post a sign on the site. There is no requirement for the city or staff to review the request prior to going to the mayor and city council to provide a thorough analysis of the request. Essentially, again, I want to stress that they're bringing this before the city council because it's a rezoning matter. If it wasn't, there's no need for them to bring that to them. So what we're proposing from the staff perspective, as you can see on the left-hand side, is the current version. I won't read the entire section, but currently what we have in place is there's a 12-month waiting period for all denied cases from city council. Once that 12-month period expires, there is a reinitiation process if the property owner of a previously denied case wants to come back to reinitiate the rezoning process. In order to do that, again, as mentioned, they would have to present that case in front of the city council and essentially provide or exemplify a significant change. One other thing that I want to share as part of the opinion that has been given by the city attorney is that at this point, the opinion that has been derived by the attorney and which has been shared by city council, it's difficult for them, essentially because of what has been established, to go against a reinitiation request. Because essentially, what are they reviewing? Are they reviewing the merits of a rezoning case? And if that's the case, but they haven't gone through a public hearing process, there is sort of a violation of the zoning procedures laws as well as our own ordinance as it pertains to the rezoning process itself for a public hearing and so forth. And because of that, any reinitiation request that comes before the city council, in most instances, is going to be approved. So the reinitiation process in itself does not mean because of the sensitivity associated with it, that's why I'm sort of trying to suggest or share that it's difficult for them to deny it because they did not necessarily go through any type of public hearing process as required. One other thing I think that I wanted to share is as part of the correspondences that you may have received from the public, emails that you may have received in opposition to this text amendment, I believe there's some misconceptions that I wanted to sort of point out. I think there's an idea of finality that was shared and that it's going to be lost if we were to eliminate the reinitiation process. And I think what was mentioned is that a denial of a land use petition, if this reinitiation is no longer in place, is not a final decision. Every action from a rezoning standpoint that city council takes and makes is a final decision. That decision is a legislative action enforced by an ordinance which outlines the outcome and the decision of the city council. It also provides the conditions which run with the property. The only way you could change that is going through another rezoning. So there is finality. I think another one that was mentioned was it does not set legal precedent. Again, a legislative action provides for legal precedent. The precedent is established, so it's not lost if there is no reinitiation process. one other thing, I think as part of that legal precedent argument, the council does not lose their ability to enforce their decisions. Their decisions are legislative actions, and again, runs with the property. If the same request was to be made on the property, it would again be recommended denial due to established precedent. What I'm trying to say here is, through administrative action, regardless of reinitiation, if we know an action was taken to City Council and it was denied, if someone was to bring the same exact request in a request for rezoning, from the staff's perspective, we would inform them of the denial. And if they were insisting on us going through the rezoning process, the outcome from a staff perspective would be the same as the original decision of the City Council. So again, the legal precedent is set once a decision has been made. I think there was also concerns about retroactive impacts. The finality argument, to a certain extent, would not apply for reinitiation. It actually goes against the argument of reinitiation as well. Reinitiation means that there is no finality. That means they could come before the council and request to restart the rezoning process. So there really is no end. So the retroactive impacts, I think that has been shared, actually that's still in place, regardless of the reinitiation being in the zoning ordinance or not. Anyone with a previous denial could come before City Council and request for the reinitiation process. The overall intent, I think, from what staff is wanting to do as part of the initiated text amendment is to make sure, again, that public participation is provided in any and every rezoning matter. And again, the reinitiation process as it currently stands does not afford that opportunity to the public. So based on that, the proposed version that staff is recommending is a little bit different from what council may want to see, but I'll go ahead and share with you what staff is recommending. Our proposal is to eliminate the reinitiation statement and to replace it as such. No land use petition affecting the same or any portion of property that was denied or deemed withdrawn with prejudice by the mayor and city council shall be accepted for filing within 18 months of the decision date. That's the extent of staff's recommendation. From a council perspective, they also wanted to add a provision for cases that are withdrawn without prejudice. So what that means is there's multiple ways that a withdrawal could take place, meaning if an applicant submits for a rezoning, and if they were to request for a withdrawal, an administrative withdrawal prior to us putting out the notice in the newspaper, then that's an administrative withdrawal. They have that ability to request that. The second part is they could go ahead and ask for a withdrawal. There's two components to that. It could be a withdrawal without prejudice, or it could be a withdrawal with prejudice. And understanding resident fatigue and understanding the process that, the laboring process that goes along with the rezoning, we wanted to cover if the decision of the council was to withdraw with prejudice, that the 18 months would apply. Again, from the council perspective, they also wanted to add the provision in the last sentence there where it says, for land use petitions previously deemed withdrawn without prejudice by the mayor and city council, a waiting period of 6 months shall apply. I just wanted to just clarify again, that last sentence is the city council's recommendation. From the staff's point of view, we would like to omit that last sentence that applies for withdrawals without prejudice. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor of this text amendment? No? Seeing none, I guess that 10 minutes is over. So now we'll take these speakers who want to speak in opposition, and a reminder that you only have 10 minutes total. So all these speakers, when the 10 minutes is up, the time's over. Okay? So the time will be kept there. So the first speaker we have is Amy Little.
Hello, my name is Amy Little. I'm the president of the JCCA, and I'm speaking on behalf of our thousands of members in dozens of neighborhoods across Johns Creek. The idea of removing the reinitiation requirement is not a new one. A year and a half ago, Trey Halliday and Mary Beth Cooper, JCCA's then president and then zoning director, shared our members' emphatic opposition to that removal. But here we are again. A year and a half later, we're still emphatically opposed to the removal of the reinitiation requirement. That's a tongue twister. Residents need to be confident that when the application is denied, it can't just keep coming back and back with minimal or no change until the residents are just too exhausted to continue fighting against it. We all want Johns Creek to flourish and to be a city we can all be proud to call home. The most successful projects in our city are those that engage the residents from the very start. Residents can work together with applicants, provide feedback, collaborate, and develop projects that everyone is happy with. Thank you.
Can you tell me how much time is left? Because we can't see it. Oh, because the clock's not working. Oh, now it is. Okay. David Neuinger. Oh, actually, there's only 3 cards here.
My name is David Neuinger. I live at 655 Glen Arbor Drive in Johns Creek. I am the Glenhurst HOA Board Treasurer. Text Amendment A19003 is similar to a previous text amendment, A18001, which this body heard at the June 5th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. For those seated before me today, I would like to tell you that the community was overwhelmingly against the removal of the reinitiation clause. At that June 2018 Planning Commission meeting, you all agreed and unanimously voted to deny Text Amendment A18001. Commissioners Taylor, Sanders, Schaefer, and Carr heard that case. And the sentiment of the Planning Commission was not only should the reinitiation clause be kept in the zoning ordinance, but that staff should work to put in policies and procedures and quantify what the significant differences in the clause should entail. At that June 5th meeting, commissioners were also worried that removing the reinitiation clause would wear down the community by having us come back again to oppose the same or a similar land use petition. Well, it has been 18 months since that June 2018 Planning Commission meeting, and the irony is the community is back in front of this body having to oppose a new text amendment which is almost the same as the previous text amendment. I can tell you that the folks who have contacted me about this issue are not very happy that this issue is back. To that end, on Friday afternoon, we started a petition in opposition to the text amendment. It has already been signed by over 450 Johns Creek residents. If you're wondering, the previous text amendment, A18001, was heard at the June 18, 2018 City Council meeting, and the City Council voted to defer the text amendment to a later date. In doing so, the City Council gave the Community Development Department 2 directives. First, this issue was to be tabled into a time when the city would be working on creating a unified development code. The thought would be that there would be citizen participation during this process, similar to the creation of the comprehensive land use plan. This directive was evident during Councilman Chris Coughlin's questioning of then Community Development Director Sharon Ebert, and by Councilman Coughlin's subsequent motion to table the item. Second, Councilman Steve Broadbent issued a directive to the community development staff to spend the time to find a more creative solution to this issue other than just removing it from the zoning ordinance. Both of these directives echoed the sentiment of the community of those who spoke during that public hearing in opposition to the text amendment. So, community development has had 18 months to take into account the recommendations you all gave them at the June 2018 meeting, the directives the City Council gave them at the June 18th, 2018 meeting, and the concerns of the community. And in taking all that feedback into account, the only thing new or different community development is proposing with this new text amendment is to extend the refile time frame of previously denied land use petitions from 12 to 18 months and to add withdrawals with or without prejudice. The community is fine with keeping the refile timeframe at 12 months. The community has no opinion one way or another on withdrawals with or without prejudice. The community, just as it was back in June of 2018, is, however, very opposed to the again proposed removal of the reinitiation clause. Finally, there is nothing in the state zoning procedures law that says the city cannot include the reinitiation clause in the city zoning ordinance. In fact, the city of Johns Creek has the reinitiation clause in its zoning ordinance because of the state CPL. OCGA 3666-2 states that local entities, quote, provide by ordinance or resolution for procedures and requirements in addition to or supplemental to those required by this chapter, unquote. OCGA 3666-3 states, excuse me, quote, zoning means the power of local governments to provide within their respective territorial boundaries for the zoning or districting of property for various uses and the prohibition of other or different uses and the regulation of development, unquote. Most importantly, OCGA 3666-5 says, quote, each local government shall adopt standards governing the exercise of the zoning power, and such standards may include factors which the local government finds relevant in balancing the interest in promoting the public health, safety, morality, or general welfare against the right to unrestricted use of property, unquote. The reinitiation clause balances the rights of property owner to eventually refile a new land use petition with the general welfare of the public who would not have to return to oppose the same or similar land use petitions from what was previously denied. So we're asking you to do one of two things. You can keep the reinitiation clause in our zoning ordinance by motioning to remove it from text amendment A19003 and voting to approve the rest of the text amendment. Or, if you cannot do that, we're asking you to vote to deny the whole text amendment, just like this body did on June 5th, 2018. Also, I do want to make a comment about one of the things that Mr. Song said. The reinitiation section says, quote, if a petition was previously denied, the owner must demonstrate that the proposed land use petition. The definition of a proposed land use petition is what is going to be or planned to be put forth to the city. A proposed land use petition does not become an actual complete land use petition until the property owner or developer has completed the required supporting documents, has been accepted by the Community Development Department, and has been given the designation of rezoning case number to start the rezoning decision final action process. This comes from the city zoning ordinance. Section 28.2 says filing deadlines. A complete land use petition shall be submitted in accordance with the advertised filing deadlines. The director may extend the filing deadlines by 2 days with a letter of explanation from the applicant justifying the delay of submittal. An incomplete petition will not be accepted. Also, Section 28.2.4, petition requirements. All petitions shall include the following with the required number of copies of each as prescribed by the director. There's 17 things. One of them is a zoning impact analysis. When a reinitiation is brought to the city, there is no set standards. There's nothing that community development has put together that says what is brought. It can be a letter saying this is what's different. It can be a site plan, and that is accepted by the city. If that is agreed to, then the applicant can bring all these things to the city and actually start the rezoning decision process. The city cannot start that final action process, and the mayor and council cannot make a zoning decision final action until the city has accepted a completed land use petition. Thank you for your time.
Grady Barnhill.
Hello, I'm Grady Barnhill. I'm HOA president for Creekside Crossing. I live at 5895 North Eaton Court, and Johns Creek. I'm not an attorney, so I'll be mercifully short. I stand with David and thank heavens he is an attorney, I think, and at least sounds like one to me. He has laid out the points very nicely for us. I'll just mention sort of the human face to this, which is we all have day jobs, and it's just very difficult to come and rally ourselves to come back for the same essential issue if we don't have to. We do like the idea that we can make a decision and kind of move forward and, fight new battles when we need to, but it's nice to have a one and done if we can. I certainly appreciate the dilemma of our learned colleagues in the city with the struggle to define significant difference, but just because something's challenging doesn't mean it's inattainable. I'm sure that would benefit us all if they come up with descriptors of what might be significant differences to help us out. So, close. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment.
I have a motion, if I may, Madam Chairman. It's a bit out of order. Will you allow it? I move that we allow more time for the citizens in attendance to comment on the issue rather than the 10 minutes. We've run out of time. It seems we have several more people who may want to speak.
Is there, because I've gone through all the cards, so are there any other people that did want to speak? No?
Oh, okay.
But good thought.
I'll withdraw my motion. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions of staff or any of the presenters this evening?
I have some questions.
One point of order, if you don't mind, if you could just close the public hearing before we transition. Thank you.
That's right. So at this moment, we're going to close the public hearing and just discuss this now.
Okay, Ben, can you tell me, is the big issue with respect to the reinitiation clause the word significant change and not really being able to define that?
Not necessarily. The way we're viewing it is related to zoning procedures law. The zoning procedures laws is specific to how we handle rezoning cases. And that's why I stress that if it wasn't any part of any type of rezoning process whatsoever, there is no need for anyone to come to City Council to seek those requirements because we would have administrative processes in place. And I know there's a discussion to say it's sort of a slight separation of a reinitiation is not a rezoning, but in essence, you're asking, at the end of the day, to ask to allow for a proposed use to come back before and to go through this rezoning process all over again. It is related to a rezoning process in itself. And what we're arguing is, by the zoning procedures law, the requirement for a rezoning case, for a rezoning hearing, the process is that we have to formally put out a notice in the newspaper, and we also have to post a sign on the property. That's the minimum from the ZPL. And then we transition to our zoning ordinance, which requires for us to provide for the analysis of the zoning impact.
Okay, here's another question. When council, if council would deny a zoning request, do they just deny it, or do they give reasons why they denied it?
It varies, but most likely, or what should be provided is a reason for the denial, and hence the use of the zoning impact analysis that provides you sort of the guideline as to what that decision may be related to, one of the five.
So in a sense, that does provide, if you will, remedies for what need to change in order to come back and get another chance.
Potentially. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily see it as a remedy. It's sort of the criteria that the decision is based on.
Okay, I see that as a remedy, so it's fine.
And the only reason why I do not refer to it as a remedy is because there's other steps that an applicant could take if they were to be denied. It just, again, how we define remedy, right? But I think we're on the same page there.
Oh, here's one more question. Are there limits to how many times they can come back in the 18-month period?
No. I mean, they have to wait 18 months,
Okay.
right? And then, so if we were to, proceed with the proposed recommendation, a denied application would have to wait 18 months before they could reapply. And when they reapply, again, the rezoning process in itself is about 3 to 4 months, right? So you got that additional time factor incorporated into the overall time aspect, the waiting period, and also the actual filing and review period.
Not that I'm into conspiracy or any of that, but someone who's pretty smart can kind of judge when they come back in that period and maybe hit a different city council so they get a different result. And to me, that's kind of concerning to give the openness to that.
That's definitely a valid concern. I can't deny that. At the same time, I could only be responsible from the staff's perspective and what we would recommend. And that's why I mentioned in terms of the legal precedent, if there is a denial on a case on a property, that denial runs with the property. There's a history. It's a legislative action that we can't discount. And again, if someone wanted to take the chance of asking for the same rezoning, staff's recommendation would not be any different from the initial decision that was made by City Council to deny it.
So you would just repeat that prior decision?
If it's the exact same, and again, that's why I shared sort of the examples of similar changes, significant differences, I mean. It didn't show that great of a change in terms of the land use itself. There are certain components of development that may have changed, but the land use in itself stayed the same. That's the key when we're talking about rezoning, is the use in itself, not the components of how long a driveway may be, how a loading dock may have been situated from one side to the other. So from the perspective of staff, that's the way we would review it. What is the land use petition? What is the request that they're making? Is it identical to essentially a case that was denied? I don't know how else staff could argue for an approval of something that may have been denied previously.
I understand that, and I think, again, as we've talked in the past, I trust you guys explicitly with that type of thing, but I almost see this as loosening this to a point that it actually puts more liability on you as staff and can raise more questions of whether you're doing those things. I know you're doing those things. You know you're doing them, but I don't know. Those are my questions for right now.
Mr. Song, may I ask for a clarification about something you were just saying? You're saying as far as the 18-month waiting period, that an applicant could bring a reinitiation, a reapplication to the staff before 18 months, that it could be filed before 18 months and then proceed through the process, yet not go to, for example, the Planning Commission or Council for 18 months. Is that right?
No.
Okay.
What I meant, and I apologize if I wasn't clear, they would have to wait the full 18 months before they could even submit.
Okay, thank you. I have another question, please. Isn't there some definition of significant difference in the ordinance, the city ordinance, or policies and procedures of the division or department?
So I wouldn't necessarily call it a definition, but I'll read it out so that you're aware of how it's stated in the ordinance. Okay. It states as such: if a petition was previously denied, the owner must demonstrate that the proposed land use petition is significantly different from the previous denial to the satisfaction of the mayor and city council before it can be considered for reinitiation. A significant difference includes, but is not limited to, a change in zoning district, use, density, height, buffers, or other methods of screening or other items which were discussed at a public hearing.
Thank you. I have a question for Ms. Little, if I may. Ms. Little, thank you for your appearance. You mentioned that you or your organization,
Could you come
Johns,
up to the microphone so it can be recorded?
that Johns Creek Community Association had opposed a change like this before. But I didn't hear your reasoning or your rationale for the opposition.
I wasn't a speaker at that time. I wasn't the president or the zoning person. But through my notes, looking back, it was the exact same reason that people have today. They're very concerned about the significant difference, that somebody could keep coming back, whether it's 12 months, 18 months, whatever that time frame may ultimately be. It could just be the same thing over and over again. And ultimately, residents just get worn down and stop showing up. And then we should have approved it the very first time then. You know?
I see. So your association would favor keeping the language about significant difference?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to ask some questions. If you go back to the slide with the two buildings with the loading docks.
Yeah.
I don't remember this zoning, but can you explain? I don't remember why it was denied in the first place.
It wasn't denied by planning. It was denied by city council.
Yes. It was denied by City Council.
We
I think
approved it.
it was relative to incompatibility with the comprehensive plan.
In 2017.
2017, yes.
And then in 2019, they moved some doors. What, if you look to the left, that's not a parking lot on the denied one, and is that a parking lot on the?
No. Actually, on the left is a separate parcel altogether. It's a separate building.
Okay, so.
The survey on the right it was more prominent on the right versus what they showed on the left.
What do you mean? That?
It's a building. It's a separate property altogether. It's
and was it
unrelated.
already built?
Yes, it's already existing. It's unrelated to that
Okay.
rezoning.
I just. What was the significant change that they made?
So initially in February of 2019, when they brought it before City Council, the significant change essentially was they put a commercial storefront in addition to having the storage facility. And then when they came back in August, they got rid of the retail component and relocated the loading dock and reduced the length of the driveway. But again, the use is the same.
And the comp plan was still the same from when it got denied because it wasn't?
No, it changed because we updated.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So that-
2017, we adopted October 2018, the new comp plan.
And is that a buffer I'm seeing? Was that part of the plan?
So
blue
that's the
zoning
other,
buffer.
the other significant change you could say is that they showed a buffer, although a buffer would be required as part of the zoning ordinance anyway.
And so how many times did this go through the process of having the signs out front and having the notice in the paper?
The
and
one
went through-
time in 2017.
I'm sorry. So there was no notice of 2019, the reinitiation?
No, ma'am, it's not required per what we have in our ordinance.
But we could place it in our ordinance, right?
Correct, and that's why we're arguing for the fact that we're referring to the zoning procedures law. Essentially, that's the argument from staff. The reinitiation process functions as a rezoning process.
Mm-hmm.
So in essence, it's an added step to go back to doing the same thing that we're going to require them to do, which is go through that rezoning. And to make sure that certain notices are in place that, again, that affords due process to the residents.
So these changes, this came theoretically, this came back through without public participation and notices and.
So the reinitiation process in itself, I think Mr. Neuinger had mentioned, they submit a letter. We take it to the City Council. And City Council, again, is reviewing something that is related to a rezoning. It's not a use that is permitted already on that site. That's why they're going through this process. So it's step 1A to 1B, essentially sort of functioning as a pre-approval, but there is no mechanism in which we notify the public that this is, unless they're scanning through the mayor and city council agenda on a regular basis to know.
So one of the things that you're trying to do with this change is to require them to come back for reinitiation with notice to the public.
Well, I think what we're saying is the process is already existing. It's the rezoning process, the land use petition process.
Okay.
It's just an additional step that's in place. But city council is somewhat taking into consideration merits of a rezoning. They're considering what is an appropriate change to allow for this rezoning to go forward. It's not a use that is already permitted.
So that's kind of going back to what I was saying, because to me, maybe I'm making it too simple, but to me, what I'm seeing happen is that there's concern that somebody can get upset because we can't clearly define significant change, right? And even though we have certain things listed, that may not be comfortable to all. So in my mind, if you get denied zoning, somebody's going to tell you why, and then you have to come back. If you come back, you should be responsible for addressing those issues.
Correct.
I must be missing something here because I don't.
Well, I'll state what I need to state. And
Sure,
I don't know if
yeah,
I'm in the
sure.
same page or not. You can tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Right.
So, in essence, yes, I understand what you're saying. The council, when they're making their decision, would make a determination based upon whatever their findings is to make that final decision. And you're saying the applicant should understand what that issue is and be able to rectify that or remedy that
If they come back.
if they want to
yes.
and bring it back. Essentially, that's what the reinitiation process is affording them. But what I'm saying is the process is already in place. It's called a land use petition. The concept of it works the same. We got a 12-month waiting period now.
Mm-hmm.
They have to wait the full 12 months. The main difference is before they could resubmit, now they have to go to city council and ask for that permission to reinitiate. What I'm telling you and what I shared during my presentation was based upon the opinion that's been shared by the city attorney and sort of notifying city council, this, in essence, is an extent of the land use petition process. It's just sort of out of step. And because of that, council, and I can't speak for all the council, right? I'm just sharing with you the feedback. Council will have difficulty if any reinitiation case came before them, and because the way significant difference is, I won't even say defined, how it's laid out, okay? That's not a definition because it says it could be, but is not limited to. That means it's a huge spectrum. And because of that, it really makes it difficult, one, for council to potentially say no. Two, because it's an extension, it is a rezoning process, and you're essentially somewhat asked to make a decision on a rezoning request without potentially following all the requirements of our ordinance and the zoning procedures law. It puts them in a bind. So that's the situation that the council is in right now. Understanding that and understanding the resident fatigue and understanding concerns, essentially the reinitiation as it currently stands, it really affords the same opportunity. They're going to get an initiation request approved and they'll come back for a rezoning. Understanding the fatigue aspect of it, that's what we're proposing to extend the time period. And I understand there may be differences of opinion in terms of the extension, 12 months to 18 months. It may not be significant enough. But also we wanted to, because of that, incorporate applying that same 18-month waiting period for withdrawals with prejudice. Meaning, the residents went through the rigor of meeting with the applicant, meeting with the developer, whoever it may be. But at last minute, the developer, the light goes off and says, oh my, I'm probably looking at a denial. I'm going to ask for a withdrawal. Previously, council, either they could still deny it, obviously, even with the request. But even if they were to withdraw without prejudice, withdraw with prejudice, because it doesn't necessarily set a legislative sort of precedent on that, at least it would require the developer to wait a full 18 months before even entertaining the idea of bringing that back if they so choose to do so. So my argument, more so than the definition of significant difference, is the argument of we have a zoning procedures law through the state. We have our zoning ordinance that outlines, like Mr. Neuinger mentioned, specific requirements. But what I'm arguing is the fact that the reinitiation process is an extension of a rezoning. If it wasn't a rezoning, if it wasn't a land use matter, there's no need for them to come to city council. If it's a permitted use within that zoning district, they would work directly with staff to get their permits. There's no need for a rezoning or any type of variation of that discussion.
Yeah, I get that.
I have a question. So you are, if I'm trying to understand this, because I wasn't there in
Yes.
2018, it's procedural. It's not, the whole argument is procedural from what I can see from your standpoint, from the staff standpoint, and not really the definition of what is significant change, what's zoning, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Is that right? Or
That is correct. Again, significant difference. I think the way it's written, and I think the opinions that you're receiving, you could tell to a certain extent, it's not very objective. It is subjective. And that's why, from my standpoint, it is what it is. We have that in our books. But the main argument here that's been made by the city attorney and that staff is also raising is the fact that it's a procedural issue.
I have one more question.
Yes.
So it goes through, say, planning commission's approved it, it's gone to the city council, they have denied it. 18 months later, 12 months later, they come back. If that extra process goes away, then they start from, again, bringing it back to the planning commission with the new concept, with everything. Am I correct in
Yes.
assuming that
Yeah.
we'll have to, again, review the whole thing? So the public will have a chance to come and give their opinion. The planning commissioners will have a chance to review it. So it's...
Yeah, you're correct in that once they wait that full period, they would submit, and function as a new rezoning. So they would have to go through notice procedures, public participation meetings with the residents, what have you, if there's additional requirements that they want to apply, and then it'll go to the planning commission, the full process that we have in place.
So I'm essentially eliminating the step where, I'm just trying to understand, talking as if, that the city council would be the first step. We are trying to eliminate that and start from scratch as the planning commission zoning new case will be the first step.
Correct.
When it
Yeah,
comes
you will
back
treat
again.
it as just any other new rezoning that comes before the planning commission and goes through that process. Yes.
We didn't have last time that we had this time is we had asked, I think you might remember, we didn't have comparisons to the cities that are near us. And now we do have that. And I looked those over pretty carefully, and it looks like ours would be a little bit more strict than what the cities that surround us have. So that was something that I had noticed.
So I have a question. If I could have Mr. Neuinger come back to the podium, please. So it appears that, and it sounds like you have the weight of at least 400 residents behind you that signed the petition. So a couple of things. I wanted to go back to what your recommendations were. And given the information that has been shared, does that change your recommendation to add to this, or does it remain the same?
I'm not sure you're understanding.
There
Adding.
were two
Right.
options.
Right. One was to deny the whole text amendment 19003. The other one was approve the 18 months if you would like, approve the withdrawals with prejudice and without 6-month and 18-month, but take out this reinitiation clause out of the text amendment, meaning if you take it out of the text amendment, it stays in the zoning ordinance.
So it
Just
can't
what
go
you
back
want.
to the city council.
Well, it would go to the city council. They could add it back in. I mean, it's their prerogative to do what they want, from what I understand.
Okay.
But you would be making the policy statement as the planning commission to say, we feel that this should stay in the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
So if you denied the whole thing, you would be making the same policy decision, but you would be also denying the 18 months and the withdrawals with or without prejudice, which the public doesn't have an opinion either way on.
One way or another.
And one other thing, you did mention about other cities around here. The city of Duluth, the city of Milton, the city of East Point, the city of Woodstock, the city of South Fulton, and Fulton County, just in this general area, all have some sort of reinitiation question in their zoning ordinances when it comes to bringing back a denied land use petition where there is a question of significant difference.
Okay.
That's 6, 7, 8, just in metro.
In the metro area.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ben, Mr. Song. Now I'm all turned around here, so I need your help with this. Let's just take this picture,
Okay.
because I'm a visual person. And let's say that the picture on the left that was denied by City Council was an apartment complex that is, and it's farmland, it's agriculture, somebody wants to come in and build an apartment complex.
Okay.
And it's denied by City Council. And then 2 years later, the developer, the applicant decides we won't add a swimming pool component because what we heard from our public participation meetings was that they don't want apartments because it will crowd our overcrowded schools. And so if you don't have a playground and a swimming pool, that will make people with children not want as likely to buy in this apartment complex. Same number of units, but instead of amenities, we're going to just make that a park. Now, they wait their time, and they come back with this new site plan, same density, no park, no amenities. Does the public get, the way things are now, does the public get to voice an opinion on that? Or is that something that the mayor and city council can say, that's significant and we're going to go with it. We're going to run with it. And then they don't ever know.
Well, no, yes and no.
Technically.
Yes and no. And what I mean by that is, if it was denied and someone wanted to propose, the same thing or whatever, any type of rezoning on that property, they have to go through the reinitiation process.
Today. And in that reinitiation process,
Yes.
would the community have a chance to have any kind of input into that decision if they don't follow the mayor and city council agendas?
No. And the thing is, it's not treated as a public hearing item either. So, but it may come up, and depending on where it is in the agenda in terms of the order, they may be able to have a chance to speak on it if they had knowledge of it as part of the public comment period in terms of the city council agenda structure. But specific to that item, no, because it's not a public hearing agenda item that affords the ability for residents to speak for or against it.
Okay, so if we vote to remove this reinitiation clause, that same scenario, denied, take the swimming pool out, come back with density, does that give, would they be forced to make a public, put the signs out, have their public participation, and have input in that, again,
Yeah, I just want to make a clarification so that I don't want to misrepresent it in any way because I'm not trying to favor one argument over the other. And the clarification I want to make is even with the reinitiation process, if they get approval from council to reinitiate the zoning, then they go through the rezoning process and they would follow the same thing. They'll notify residents and so forth. So at the end of the day, you're going to end up in the same location, right? They're going to eventually go through a rezoning process. If they're proposing another rezoning on a property that was previously denied, what the main difference here that we're arguing is, should the reinitiation process be in place? Meaning, what purpose does it serve? And does that purpose in any way violate any other ordinances or laws that may be existing from the city's ordinance or even from the state's codes? Because, again, I think the argument from the residents is, it's sort of hard for me to understand it just because I'm thinking differently, just to be honest with you. And because the reinitiation process, all it does is just another step for them to go for a rezoning. And like I explained to you, the position that council is in based upon the legal sort of recommendation that's been provided by the city attorney, it puts them in a position where really they're not going to necessarily deny a reinitiation process. So it all ends up at the same point. We're going to have a rezoning.
When you say it's, I love the fact that she brought up an example, so that makes, so say the same apartment complex, so they have approved it, so it comes back to us here with the site plan, new site plan, so the whole thing starts all over again, except that you have added a step, and you're saying that step, eventually, it's almost 90% or 95% going to be a yes. So it's almost procedural. You go there, you say yes, come back to start here. So what is the alternate? If that goes away, then same site, same developer. I'm as a resident, I want to see what I will have more say in versus you
Sure.
know what. So it almost sounds as if Plan B is where I get to say I have more say in it. Because if I don't like my high density right next to my house, I want to make sure that I go there every time and say it.
I want to be fair in the explanation. I think the participation aspect is no different, even with the reinitiation. The only thing about the reinitiation is just that specific process alone doesn't afford the public that ability. But because of what we know that the opinion that council has received, eventually it's going to lead to that. The concern is if they do, say someone brings something and it may be really significant, I don't know what that may be. And I can't necessarily throw out an example out there. But if council was to deny it, and I think this argument came up too, if they were to deny that reinitiation process, and if it was to go to court, would the city be able to defend that decision? That's the main thing here. I understand there may be, we haven't seen many of those, but that possibility is out there. And I understand some people may, understand that as just part of doing business and part of being a government. But if there's a way for us to alleviate from getting a lawsuit, why not clean that up if at the end of the day we're getting to the same point?
Can I just say from my perspective, I wouldn't lighten the requirements. I'd make them stronger in order to protect us as a city and leadership and all of that. So to me, because I'm not understanding why you can't address both the state procedural requirements and that, and ask the developer or whoever it is that wants to submit again to say, look, last time we denied you and this is why, and we're asking you to remedy that. And if you don't like the word remedy, that's fine. But I think remedy is more specific and includes but is not limited to. A remedy is council gave us 5 things we need to do to make this more palatable, to put it into the box that it's supposed to fit in to get approval. And so if you're going to come, because one of the points you made is about fatigue of the residents, and that's fact. The other concern I have is where it's so open-ended and they can just come and resubmit the same thing. That puts you guys through the gauntlet to have to keep spending your time getting it ready, refreshing it, double-checking the tree ordinance, all of those things, where if it's specific to what they need to fix, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know.
The only thing I would add to that is sort of, again, what does reinitiation serve? If it doesn't have a public component whatsoever, what does it serve? I guess, and I think the argument for reinitiation would be stronger if the city attorney did not provide that opinion. Meaning, if the city attorney didn't say, look, this is going against our zoning procedures law, or that's his sort of interpretation of it.
Right. That's his
then
interpretation.
Council could comfortably possibly say no and end it right there, and it doesn't involve public comment. And again, this is more hypothetical. I'm not saying that council can't do it. They could do whatever they please. But it just becomes a little bit more muddied in terms of the action that they could take. That is I think the original intent of that reinitiation was just that, to fight for the residents. If there was, a similar situation where a developer was relentless, an applicant was relentless, wanted to bring the same thing over and over again, it doesn't even go ahead and bother the residents. It just, they come before the council and council says, no, sorry, bring something different, bring something new. But again, like the zoning procedures law is the crux of the issue right now. That's what we're trying to argue.
Can you explain to me, because I'm not getting that, where does the zoning procedure law crash into what we're trying to remove? What is restricting that or causing the problem?
The connection that I'm trying to make here is this. The reinitiation process in itself, what is that reviewing? Is that, what matter is it taking up by what matter is the city council taking up? Is it a contract? Is it a budgetary matter? Or is it a land use matter? It's a land use matter. I don't necessarily know, from my opinion, how you could separate reinitiation from a rezoning, because you're going through the reinitiation because it's related to a rezoning. And therefore, per the zoning procedures law, it's outlined what the minimum standards that, as local governments who have the full authority to exercise zoning power, but these are the minimum standards that we have to abide by. One, as mentioned, for the purpose of providing due process. That's why they want us to post signs, these large 4x4 signs. They want us to post in the newspaper. And also, and then we have the added functions of the public participation meeting, and then go through the hearing process. That's what the full gamut of that specific Title 36, if I read it correctly, forgive me, represents. Yeah, Chapter 66, Title 36.
So tell me if I have this right. What you're saying is that by removing that part, we really don't weaken the requirements on the developer, because by the sheer fact that they have to reapply and go through the process again, the answer should be the same by the same set of decision makers, as long as nothing changed. Like, for instance, this got passed because the land use plan changed. It didn't get passed because they moved 2 dock doors in a different area.
It didn't change because of land use. That the opinion changed because of what was shared as an opinion of the city attorney, to say that we may potentially be in violation of the zoning procedures law. So it's one thing, sort of going back to Commissioner Taylor's example, if I was to explain it from the staff's perspective, even if, let's say, for instance, they work with the public and said, hey, we don't want additional families, and we're going to get rid of the playground, we're going to get rid of the pool, so we attract a certain type of clientele. For us, the land use is still the same. Apartment is an apartment, density is our recommendation is going to be reminiscent of whatever that original decision was, because the facts of the land use hasn't changed. All this other stuff could come up as part of the public hearing process. They could say, hey, we spoke with the residents. Residents come and say, hey, yeah, we agree. Staff, again, it's just a recommendation. But for us, it's hard for us to go out of the limb on something that's identical to something that's been previously denied. We're going to run it through the public hearing process to let it all filter out and let the Planning Commission make their recommendation and ultimately City Council make that final decision based upon input.
So again, let's go back up to here. What I heard was that the reason it got denied the first time was because it didn't fit into the land use plan. Is that right? Did I hear that right?
That is one of the reasons it's
One
getting
reason.
denied, yeah.
Okay. So then when they brought it back 2 years later, we discussed that the comp plan had changed. I'm assuming, the bad assumption, but I'm assuming that that meant that the land use requirement in this area had some type of a change that allowed for this to happen.
Correct.
Okay. So that is a big reason why they could have got approved the second time.
It was still, I believe, past 4 to, is this the one that was 4-3?
Yes.
It was
It's
still
3-3
4.
tie
Yeah.
for the original
I'm saying the
rezoning.
reinitiation.
Yeah, 4-3.
Reinitiation, 4-3, right?
Yes.
And even then, it was a 4-3 reinitiation approval from council.
Can I also use this as example? So let's say the land use plan stay the same. So if you look at the site plan on the left side, the driveway in the back is longer than the loading deck, which is in red on the original denied case, is in the middle. So in the new plan they propose, the driveway is shortened in the back, then the loading deck is on the side. So to you, it might not be significant. Maybe to the applicant it is. So if the mayor and the city council deny them to come back based on this, they can sue the city and argue, I believe this is significant. Therefore, it's going to put us in legal jeopardy if we deny a case to come back. It was so hard to capture the...
Yeah, I think again, that argument, the merit of that argument is not necessarily the significant change. Again, it's what action have you taken? You have made, potentially it could be argued, you have made a land use decision based on what? What did you consider as your criterias? Every other case that we review, from a rezoning standpoint, from a special use permit standpoint, you have your criterias listed for you. You have a full review of the comprehensive plan, surrounding neighborhood or surrounding uses, the zoning, density, all those aspects that you take into consideration as we adopted a standard sort of criteria that we review and follow to make a decision on rezonings. That's missing. So again, I want to sort of, I'm trying to say, move away from that significant difference more so to our argument is, again, there's a procedure, there's a law in place, and are we meeting it or are we not? Through that reinitiation clause. That's the main thing.
Another option you might have is, again, you can add all those requirements back. You can, for the reinitiation process, you can say, okay, let's do public hearing. Let's provide size on the property. Let's also do the zoning impact. However, then you duplicate two processes. By adding all the requirements, you are making the reinitiation a rezoning process. Yeah. Then after it's getting approved, they come back to rezoning again. Therefore, we believe it's a waste of taxpayer money if we duplicate two processes. That's why we believe by removing the reinitiation process, it's going to simplify the process and also still provide the protection by through the zoning again.
Could you go to the 5th slide, please?
That's 7.
5th slide?
Yes. So it says circumstances may also change over time to make a previously denied case valid without any material changes. Would those circumstances be things like
Sure.
adopting a
I
new
can give you
comprehensive-
two. So, for instance, we might have a case, let's say, under the old comp plan, which saying should be no residential within this area, but then we have a new comp plan saying we are going to have residential here. So, therefore, by having the same proposal, it's going to be in compliance with the new comp plan. And
Okay. So that's a great example. So with the reinitiation process still in place, what does that look like for the community? So I've got my subdivision, and then it was supposed to be AG beside me, and here comes my apartment complex. They were denied, and now they're back, and they're going to keep their swimming pool and their density. So what difference will removing the reinitiation clause make to public participation? Any?
We also like to emphasize it's a balance act, right? So you have the public and you also have the property owner rights. So for the planning commission and council, you have to consider how to balance those interests.
To answer your question, it depends. Meaning, just the reinitiation process, I think, as we have mentioned, there is no public hearing component. There's no public notification component. And the reason why I say it depends is if council was to deny it, then it ends right there, right? But if they approve it, then it goes through the rezoning process all over again. So depending on whatever that outcome is, it all rests on the mayor and city council based upon this reinitiation clause without necessarily the input from the public. Okay? And I'm not trying to, I'm just strictly stating it the way it's written.
Plus if council were to deny it, then we could put the city into jeopardy legally.
That's one of the arguments, yes. And again, it could go both ways. It depends on the applicant. But I think the key thing that I want to, again, stress is what action are they taking? Action on what type of item? If it's a land use item, then we should treat land use items the way we have it in our ordinance that we're going to run land use petitions, which is notices, public participation meeting, and so, and the planning commission and city council.
And we should trust the process, basically.
Well, and
First time.
Yeah, I mean, trust the process. If there's issues, I mean, obviously, yeah, we would need an amendment, but that's the process that we have in place.
And
And
it
is-
worked the first time. So you would assume it would work the second time if they brought the same.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
the
yeah.
assumption that's.
Yeah,
and what's the waiting period?
18 months.
What we're proposing is 18 months instead of 12.
So this reads within 18 months, which is different than waiting 18 months.
It's true. I think that's the one that's in now.
Between may and shall.
Man, I have a question. Just a quick one. So after 18 months, after 18 months, is by removing, I'm talking about option A, removing reinitiation, then you come back to planning commission after 18 months.
Correct.
If you don't remove that, then it goes back to the city council just to get approved to come back again to the planning commission
Okay, that's
within
helpful.
a few weeks.
Yes. And if that, again, I understand the within, if there's a better word choice that you would like to initiate to make effective a stronger statement to say the full 18, feel free to make that suggestion if that is how you want to proceed.
Well, I
About
think that's
not
important
before?
because if there's no limit to how many times they can bring, and they say within 18 months, they could bring it back 5 times in every 2 months.
Right.
And,
Yes.
talk about fatigue.
What-
That's a little bit too.
What if we change that to not before 18 months?
Or no sooner than would be
Thank you.
classic language, yeah. No sooner than 18 months. That's what you want.
No? Okay.
What is there to tell us that a petition would not be filed after 18 months without any change in, without any significant difference? If we remove that language about significant difference, why couldn't the applicant just file over and over at 18 months? If you remove significant difference, doesn't it need to somehow say you've got to make some change here?
Well, I mean, I don't want to say that's implied, but that's the outcome of a denial. They understand fully what they have been denied, that their request wouldn't.
Well,
And
perhaps
why
they do, but that's
understand
not
that?
in the
'Cause that's the
ordinance.
law?
No, because I'm saying, well, denial is the action it's a legislative action, like I said, from council. There's no way you could change that unless you go through the rezoning process again. And like you had mentioned, is there should be some justification as to why council is proceeding with that decision. and I understand that question does come up. They could file the same thing over and over. Yes, they can, hypothetically, right? That possibly is definitely there. I guess it's a reality. Would they do that? Have we seen that in the past? Have we seen that in terms of the pattern in the city? No.
I think we haven't seen it because we've required them to make significant changes and they give up at some point.
At the same time, the process, if there's, I think you mentioned this and not here, but in terms of developers, they're looking at a certain development based upon a certain yield.
Right.
Okay. Certain density. If it's emphatic in terms of the denial, the density that they're proposing is not going to work. They have to bring it down to whatever that discussion may have been. I don't know what that may be. Also, what's represented in our comprehensive plan.
Right.
So those factors do play. Those market factors do play into a decision of the developer. But I think we talk about developer and residents, but at the same time, we also don't necessarily talk about the property owner. The property owner could be very well a Johns Creek resident as well. But what undue burdens do we place on them that we don't place on someone else? Again, that's just another sort of factor to consider.
May I ask, what exactly is a rationale for changing from 12 months to 18? Especially where we see that our surrounding municipalities use about 12 months uniformly. Why are we going for 18? Is that concern about citizen fatigue at coming to meetings? But
yes, that essentially is the primary reason of extending it by an additional 6 months to the waiting period because of concerns of resident fatigue.
No, I think a couple of them were 18. One of them was 24.
Okay.
City of Brookhaven.
could I please ask a question again of one of our speakers? Ms. Little? Please, yes, sorry. Can you tell me whether you or the Johns Creek Community Association would see a difference between 12 and 18 months as far as coming out to speak at a hearing?
No one has really made that be a super strong point. I mean,
Okay.
I guess personal opinion, I feel like 18 is almost worse because it's now that's a year and a half versus 1 year, and people may have forgotten what it was, and
Okay.
it's no one has made a big deal about that.
Okay.
For us.
Thank you.
Ms. Little, I just have one more question.
Sure.
And I'm trying to get my head around all the data points because so last year I'm trying to see as a resident if you have more opportunities to come to a zoning case and talk about it versus the city council approving it or denying it or whatever happening without, because then you have to look at every agenda, come for a public comment in the city council meeting. I mean, I'm talking about residents as I would be.
Sure.
I'm trying to understand the rationale of not of wanting to have this procedure versus that.
So it's still so the way it is now, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's like a two-step process.
Okay.
So, or a three-step. Somebody comes and they put their application out there. They have their public hearing. It comes before everybody. It goes to city council, and let's say it gets denied for whatever reasons. So that person wants to come back in 12 months, which is what they're allowed to do right now. So right now, the way it says, our thing says it has to be significantly different. So they're going to make some changes to it. And one would hope that they would be the changes that came out of the public hearing, but not necessarily. They could do whatever they want, as long as it's significantly different. They have to bring that to the city council. The city council can say, no, this isn't different enough, or whatever their rationale would be for denying it. Then they have to go away again. If the city council says, yes, we're going to allow, you have made some changes. This does look like what the public was looking for. So then you're allowed to resubmit it, right? And then it actually starts the whole process over again. But hopefully that process now goes a lot better. And now they have taken some of those public comments, you would think, into consideration. So the second time it comes through, it goes through quickly, hopefully. Hopefully that's the way our process is set up, and hopefully it does work that way. It's the significant difference part that makes everybody feel comfortable. If it got denied, why did it get denied? Don't come back with just a missing swimming pool or just a whatever. It should be significant.
Right.
Well, it's.
I mean, I think that warehouse.
Well,
one
what
is-
does our definition say? I don't think swimming pools were in it.
Okay,
So,
okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
And I have a question also, same to Mr. Neuinger. Did I pronounce your name correctly? Thank you. Do you see, or do you think your associates see, your neighbors, a difference between the 12 months and 18 months waiting period between petitions?
No. I mean, if you keep the reinitiation clause in, 12 months is fine. You have to understand there may be legitimate reasons why a property owner comes back after denial. And they may have, they may bring something completely different. We've had things where, I will give you an example. There was a gas station denied on a piece of property. Property owners came back 4 or 5 years later, wanted townhomes. No problem. It's significantly different. So if there's a legitimate reason, no, we don't mind 12 months. We don't mind 18 months. I think 18 months, again, as Ms. Little said, is too long. I think the issue is, with this reinitiation, we spent the time fighting an original land use petition, and in some cases, months. There's a gentleman here who hadn't spoken yet, but was opposed to the Embry Farms rezoning, which a number of you remember, which I think Ms. Sanders said was a moving target. That took 9 to 10 months from beginning to end, where the community was involved. Mayor and council denied it. With the reinitiation, we in the community look at this as, we respect our elected officials and the mayor and the city council to protect us and make that decision if it comes back and it's the same thing or very similar, to say no, or if it's substantially different, significantly different, yes, let it move forward. We don't have to say anything at that particular public hearing where the reinitiation comes forward, because we've already had our say originally when it was denied. And if it comes back where the land use petitioner has something the same or significantly different, our concerns from the original rezoning are the same. We don't have to come back up and readdress that. So that's not a problem to us. The interesting thing about the whole public hearing is, and forgive me, I've got the original agenda report from Ms. Ebert, dated May 26, 2018, where she brought this to the attention of the city council. And Ms. Ebert says, if the request is approved by the mayor and city council, then the property owner will be allowed to submit the revised land use petition to the city's community development department for review and approval following the standard land use petition review process. Talking about the reinitiations, he says, a public hearing is not required for the review. The reason why there is a public hearing for the reinitiation is because, on this same report, the city attorney opined that there needed to be a public hearing to hear a reinitiation. So let me make that clear. There was no policies and procedures for reinitiation. Ms. Ebert went to the city attorney. He said, we need to have a public hearing for the reinitiation. Now you're being told that the city attorney is saying that if you have a public hearing, it's a problem because it doesn't follow the state zoning laws. So which is it? That's the problem we're having with this. We're getting very conflicting information, and we have no problem with the way the zoning ordinance is written. It protects us. Again, our elected officials get the right, we give them that right to say, hey, here's another land use petition. It's the same. The public just went through this year and a half ago, whatever. We're going to deny it so that they don't have to come back and spend 6, 8, 12 months on a rezoning. There was a racetrack rezoning at the corner of Medlock Bridge and Parsons Road that I fought for 11 and a half months. That's what we're dealing with when we talk about fatigue and these things coming back, the same thing or something similar. That's why this is here. Again, that's why we want it kept in. One last thing, I will give you an example. I'm sorry I'm running on, but there's a piece of property on Parsons Road near Medlock Bridge. When I moved here in 1997, shortly after that, 1998, property owner went to Fulton County to have, townhomes built there. Fulton County commissioners denied it. 2006, property owner came back to Fulton County, asked for townhomes again. Fulton County denied it. 2015, many of you heard this case, the Beezer townhome rezoning at that same piece of property, 2015. Another developer came back again with townhomes for the third time. Property had never been developed continuously. And it was denied again, finally, by the city council in 2015. And after that, this is a piece of property with single-family homes on 3 sides. A builder bought it, and they're building single-family homes, which is what is supposed to be on that piece of property. So that's a real-life example of the community having to come back 20-something years to fight the same exact thing. And it was Fulton County before the first 2 times, so we couldn't do the reinitiation because in 2015 it was the first time the city heard it.
So, Mr. Neuinger, forgive me if I'm stepping on your
that's
comment. Do you think using the criteria of significant difference in the petitions or applications would make a difference in that case? For example, you wouldn't have exactly the same townhome proposal over and over and over for years.
It just depends. Again, you've got some information here. I think the last time we met with the previous rezoning case, Mr. Schaefer said he would like to see these things quantified. Mm-hmm. That's fine.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So how come the city of Milton and the city of Duluth don't feel like it's legally a problem because they have the significantly different in their code or their section there, and they obviously have city attorneys as well?
It's an opinion from the city attorney. That's
Yeah.
all I could say. I mean, I think it was mentioned when I was reviewing the meeting from June 5th, 2018, a similar question came up about Milton. I mean, the fact is, and potentially even for South Fulton, is that any city that was born out of Fulton County, for the most part, adopted the Fulton County ordinance. And now we're just getting around to sort of having this discussion, or having discussion for the past 2 years or so. But yeah, similar situation may be the case in Milton, but I can't necessarily.
And then, is there any way that instead of it going to city council, after the 18 or 12 months, 12 or 18 months, it comes to planning and they say this isn't significant enough, we're not even going to take it? I mean, could that be the step? Instead of taking it to city council, and now city council's worried that they're going to get sued and...
But the thing is, the city council is the only body that can make that decision.
About significant difference?
No, about land use. Mm. Land use is city council makes the final decision. Mm-hmm. Everyone else is a recommending body.
Since we've referred so much to advice of counsel, though I kind of hesitate to do that in public, but I think we've already gone there. Would would it address the objection and the supposed conflict with state law if we simply provided notice of subsequent hearings, the reinitiation, for example, if we put up the sign, publish notice in the newspaper? It seems that that may be a problem under, you have it, I think, in front of you in Title 36, Chapter 66, 4. That little A, it says the local government, blah, 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 at least 15, but no more than 45 days prior, shall provide a hearing, you publish it in the newspaper and so forth. Is that the problem? I don't see it otherwise. Is that the number one hurdle we're looking at?
Yes.
Well, gosh, that seems fairly simple.
Well, but the thing is, we have a process in place.
Right.
It's the same process, but you're creating an added function for just that reinitiation. But as part of that reinitiation process, or that clause that the applicant who has been denied must go through, that they must abide by, ultimately, what is the decision that council is making? Is it a land use decision or is it not? That's the primary sort of argument, concern from I guess the city's perspective, the staff's perspective, from the legal perspective. Is it circumventing what we have in place as our land use petition process? That's the crux of that argument.
I think you're always, when you have attorneys' opinions, they're always going to have an opinion, and many of them go the opposite way just for fun, I guess. But at the end of the day, I don't see why we can't cover both things. I'm missing how we can't follow the rules of the state and all this other stuff and put, just like Milton and Duluth has done, put some requirement on the developer that if you want to develop that same project, that you need to do something different to address the issues of why it didn't pass in the first place.
I don't know what Duluth and Milton may have in place. Milton has the same language as us. Milton has the same exact language.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, is that...
And procedurally, I don't know what they have.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. When you're looking at the language, it's no different from what we have. Procedurally, they may function a little bit differently. I don't know. But I think the same argument is, if you have a land use petition process, and we're going to essentially just only apply certain components for reinitiation, but we're not going to run it through the full gamut.
I don't think we're saying that.
No, but I'm saying if we were to put a notice or a sign, what have you,
right,
but exclude potentially, the criteria, the zoning impact analysis. To what extent? How do you essentially modify that process to be different from?
I don't think you do. I think it's the state process overlaid with some more specific requirements that we in Johns Creek feel are important to support the integrity of our community and what the residents are trying to understand and want, which is why all of us, including City Council, should be here trying to represent the residents. So I don't know. I guess I'm not that smart because I can't figure out how we can't do both.
Yes, of course we can do both. So we can add public noticing to the reinitiation process, and we can also provide zoning impact analysis. However, as we explained, you are kind of duplicating you are making the reinitiation process the same as rezoning. Then we have to pay for mailing. Staff have to spend time writing the report just for reinitiation, then do the same again later. It's kind of a duplication of the same process.
I actually get that. What I'm saying is that because the changes are potentially significant enough to allow applicants to react differently than they have in the past, for instance, resubmitting every couple of months for the next 10 years, to me, that's probably going to take more of staff time than having a more defined process that maybe up front requires more time, but in the end kind of limits the opportunities on an ongoing basis. So, I don't know.
Can I ask Mr. Barnhill, come forward. I just want to make sure that you're not feeling left out.
And you only had 57 seconds the first time.
So the previous questions that were asked to the other presidents of the HOA around the 18 months to 12 months and having that be a significant, I think, probably barrier for people to come back and have a memory and all that. What are your thoughts about that, and how would your community respond?
Yeah, I would answer similarly to David and others that 12 or 18 is not our sticking point. We could go either way on that. I think the importance of having a process that gives us a chance, at least, to say, no, this is not that different, that gives us at least a shot at not having to come back. If they do say yes, then, as you say, we initiate the same process with the same protections we would always have. So I think, as David pointed out, we've already had our say on the no side. So that works for us. So, yeah, I think we could go either. I do like if we can't do anything else, I do like the suggestion earlier we drop the 6 months thing, that from the withdrawn but with prejudice.
Withdraw, okay. Without prejudice, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So does anybody have any other questions? So does anybody have a motion?
I move that we deny text amendment A-19-003.
A second.
So we have a motion and a second. Who seconded it?
Give it to her.
Ruth, okay. It was confusing. So those in favor of denying, hold on, I have to look up the number. Where is it? It's under one of these papers. Oh, here it is. A-19-003. All those in favor to deny, raise your right hand. Opposed? So it's denied by Planning Commission.
Can I make a comment? I think, is it possible for us to go back and try to reword it so that we're addressing some of the concerns of the council, our attorney and council, but not weakening it to a point where it's a free-for-all on the developer side? Because that's how I see this.
Except for I think that we've already made a motion and we,
Well, I
and so
know,
now,
but I'm
but
just-
maybe as a
Yeah,
suggestion to
right, I
council.
Yeah, the only reason why I didn't respond is because you mentioned it as a
Yeah.
comment, so.
I
definitely
would
take that
say
into
just as
consideration.
a mention to council potentially.
Well, just
So-
in passing, that's my opinion. All right.
Are there any departmental updates?
Actually, we do have one that on item D, other business, 2020 Planning Commission calendar. It's just more or less an acknowledgement of the calendar. This is based upon the dates that we received for city council meeting dates.
Did anybody have any problems with the calendar? And everybody looked them over and, okay?
Okay. In terms of departmental updates, there are none. I probably won't see you until next year, so Merry Christmas. But yeah, again, we had training today. If there's any other suggestions for training topics that you would like to have, then feel free to email me and we'll go from there.
I'd like to thank you for that training opportunity. It was excellent information.
Yeah, it was great
Valuable
information.
for all of us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
thank
really
you.
great. So I wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight and wish everyone happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and we will see you guys next year, okay? So all in favor of adjourning, do I have a motion?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.